we know today is we got it wrong for a lot of reasons. An over-reliance on technical intelligence, not enough human intelligence, history, his denial, his deception. At the end of the day, we were wrong. But men and women made honest judgments, stated those judgments, and we have to live with that.
The president defended George Tenet. George Tenet was under plenty of fire when he was CIA director. The president defended him. The president thanks him for his service. That's a tough job, being the director of the CIA.
Indeed, the president gave George Tenet the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest award he can bestow after Tenet's service at CIA had ended. His book is now out. It's called, what is it called? The Center of the Storm, My Years at the CIA, and it has kicked up a storm. Some thoughts on all this now from Mort Kondracki, executive editor of Roll Call, Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and the syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer, Fox News contributors all. Well, this book is long, and it's stuffed with all kinds of stuff about all kinds of stuff. What to you, Mort, is the most significant issue raised by the book, or the most significant fact adduced, or whatever?
Well, you can be on all sides of this thing. I mean, he's been attacked by former people in the CIA saying that that
what
he
about you?
Well, I haven't been able to read the whole book. I've read parts of it. What is one of the most significant things is that Bush gets off the hook here. He's got fights that he picks with Wolfowitz, with Cheney, with Doug Feith at the Pentagon, and all of that. That they were trying to push a war with Iraq before 9/11, et cetera, et cetera. And yet the president comes off clean and as though he were not there, as though he wasn't responsible for all this. Now, there ought to be, and Tenet met with the president every single day. He was his briefer, his intelligence briefer. He should have presumably gotten some sense of where the president was going, why he was going there, who was influencing him, who he was listening to. We have no sense of that from the book.
Mara?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is pretty interesting, that he does kind of try to set the record straight about how he was mistreated by various people.
But not the president
somehow. I think that's interesting, and I suppose he'll be asked about that as he's doing his round of interviews. The other thing I do think is interesting is that, number one, he talks about all these terrorist plots that have been foiled. Be nice to hear which ones they were, because that's significant.
Yeah, he uses the number 20.
20, okay, 20, that's a high number.
And, well, in Jim Angle's report tonight, a former CIA official said that number is low.
The other thing that I think is interesting, he says that the decision to go to war was when, not if. And part of that is in defense of trying to downplay the prominence of his slam dunk remark in the decision to go to war. But you know, that operates on the assumption that that the administration should have had a discussion about whether it was a good idea. Sounds like they made up their minds right from the beginning.
That's what he saw. And of course, the administration officials have now said that there was all manner of debate on this, not to include an extensive debate in Congress, which led to a long resolution with all kinds of reasons in it, not just weapons of mass destruction.
Well, in fact, what Tenet is charging, and I think the charges he's making on television now is much more sensational than what's in the book, and it's a way to sell the book. He had said that there was no discussion of imminence, the imminent threat from Iraq. But if you look at the book itself, he writes on page 328, it was never a question of a known imminent threat. It was all it was about an unwillingness to risk surprise. And in fact, the President's State of the Union address in 2003, the President said, some have said we must not act until the threat is imminent. The President says, no, I don't. That's not the way to look at it after 9/11. You can't take the risk of waiting until the threat is imminent. So that's a phony charge. And the other charge, which was sensational, was that Cheney and the others were obsessed with Iraq, had it always on their mind, and the focus was Iraq. But of course it was. Iraq, for 10 years, after the invasion of Kuwait in August 1990, was the #1 foreign policy problem and threat to the United States and the Middle East. That's why it was an obsession of the Clinton administration, all the stuff about weapons of mass destruction, UN resolutions, sanctions, the eroding of sanctions, the
no-fly zones, bombings,
no-fly zones, and then there was a 4-day military attack by the Clinton administration in December of '98. On Iraq, and you're going to tell me it wasn't the focus of our concerns? Of course it was, and that was only 2 years before the Bush administration came into power. So of course, in the first year of that administration, Iraq would be the focus. There's nothing unusual about that, and to make it a charge against Cheney and the neocons is absurd.
I was struck in the book by the assertion that of all the forms of information that they got to try to head off these terrorist attacks, which he claims there was considerable success in doing, and obviously there hasn't been one, the detainee program, high-value detainee program, which included the enhanced interrogation techniques that some have derided as torture, although nobody really knows for sure what they were, was the most valuable thing.
Right.
What did you think of that?
I thought that was very significant, and he doesn't define what the interrogation techniques were. Presumably they include waterboarding, which lots of people, including John McCain, regard as torture. I personally don't. I mean, it seems to me that you have to inflict some kind of lasting damage on somebody, not just scare them to within an inch of their lives. But it makes people talk.
The most telling thing is what Khalid Sheikh Mohammed said when he was arrested in Pakistan. I'll talk to you in New York when I have a lawyer. He thought he'd attacked the Clinton America, in which acts of terror were treated as criminality and not as an act of war. And he learned a different lesson, and that's why in treating him not as a criminal, but as a war criminal and an enemy, we got information, which is why we haven't had a second attack since 9/11.